Welcome on to this edition of Up as we head towards the 2026 Comrades Marathon. And we have got a pretty cool guest on today's podcast. You would have seen his name and his analysis over the years around the Comrades Marathon. And I asked him to take a look at some of the data from this year's race just to get a feel on the pacing buses. And that's exactly what we are going to be talking about today, looking at how successful the pacing buses are. Should you be running in a pacing bus and pinning your hopes on a bus driver? Is that the best way to finish Comrades? We're going to be diving deep into the data today. Before I introduce our guest, though, just a quick update on last week's podcast. It was, the feedback has been absolutely amazing about Pie-Pacifque's story and his journey to Comrades and the coincidences between his Comrades journey and what happened to him going through the genocide in Rwanda in the mid-90s. I do have an update from Pie-Pacifque, so make sure you stick around until the end of this podcast to get that update. A great pleasure now to welcome onto Up the running man. You would have seen all his data on Facebook over the years. He's done tons of analysis on all the finisher stats and the stats of people going through different timing mats. And a great pleasure to welcome him onto the podcast. You'll know him from runningman.co.za as well. Stuart Mann, welcome. Nice to touch base.
Great. No, thanks for the invite, Brad. Great to be here.
Stuart, I'm super interested to talk about what we are going to talk about today. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it, and I'm going to ask you this question because I know you know the answer, but I think there are two types of runners in this world. They're those that literally count every single race they've done, and then those that don't have a clue. And I fall into those that don't have a clue camp. Like if you had to ask me how many marathons I've run, I don't know. If you had to ask me how many 10Ks I've run, I don't know. You keep track of everything. And I know you run lots of marathons. You are a marathon fundi and you love marathons. What's the count on now? I can't keep up. I see them, but I can't keep up anymore.
After Sunday, 285. But I only count marathons and above. So if you ask me how many 10Ks or half marathons I've run, I wouldn't have a clue. So no, just the marathons.
Stuart, I'm amazed at how people keep track. Like, I think I'm in the minority, actually. I think people, we asked on Facebook a while ago, like, how many half marathons and 10Ks have you run? I was floored by the response. And I'm going to ask people in the comments as well, like, let us know how many 10Ks, 5K races, like, how many races have you run? Pop those into the comments because it's mind-blowing, like, that people keep track of that. But you obviously do like statistics. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing because this isn't your day job. And you like numbers. What sort of got you into the sort of data analysis stuff around Comrades and running in general?
I think it was just being curious, particularly around the Comrades stats. It's such a nice big data set, and then just kind of thinking, I wonder this, or people throw out opinions, and everyone's got an opinion, but the data doesn't lie. So sometimes it's quite, it's just nice to go and check and say, actually, you're wrong, or you're right, or actually, this is really, really surprising. It's like, you're right, but even righter than what you originally thought. So, sometimes, there's lots of, I guess, myths and legends around Comrades. Sometimes they prove to be true, and sometimes they prove to be untrue.
Which is quite funny, because that leads really nicely into how this conversation came about. Is I've had this sort of gut feel around pacing buses for quite a while, and here at Coach Parry, we're not anti-pacing buses, but we often say to people, you have to run your own race, but we didn't have any data to really back that up. And I popped you a message a week or so ago and said, hey, listen, like, is it possible to dig into the data, looking at the bus drivers and the pacing buses, and look at what percentage of people finish Comrades running the whole way with the pacing bus and at what stage and that sort of thing. And you went back and did all the calculations and looked at all that data, and the findings have been I don't want to say pretty surprising, because I had this gut feel, but I mean, you said to me as well that they're worse than what you thought they were. Like, as an overview, like, big picture, we're going to dive into some of the individual numbers in a second, but what has surprised you out of doing this analysis about the pacing buses?
So I think there's a few surprises. One of the big ones is how few people stick with a bus. So both if you just do a single split and the finish, can compare where they're with the bus, particularly in the first half, but even all the way through to quite close to the end for a lot of the buses. Another one is just the low success rate, particularly in the first half. It's really, really low, like well under 50% people who were with who actually with the bus. And I would have thought it would have been a little bit higher than that. Obviously, there are some variables there, and there is some context. The data is the data; it doesn't show you everything. So, for example, you might find a case where people who are really touch and go with the medal or touch and go with the finish, in the case of the 12-hour bus, they are the people who stick with the bus, and other people tend to run more of their own race. So, obviously, we can't determine that. But on the hard facts, it was a bit lower than what I was expecting before I started the analysis.
Yeah, and let me say this up front, Stuart. Like I know quite a few of the bus drivers. I don't want to knock any of the bus drivers. I think that, they're all volunteers. They also aren't on full-time employees of any of the races. So they're doing it because they love the race that they're running, and they want to try and help as many people as possible. So they're coming into it with the best intentions. They definitely don't want to wreck anybody's race. That's not what they're doing. My gut feel around this came, and I've spoken about this on this podcast quite a bit, is especially after this year's Comrades compared to my first Comrades, because the similarities between those two races were actually, it's uncanny how similar they were and what happened during race day. And in my first Comrades, which was back in 2010, I ended up missing the cutoff at Winston Park. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is running the way other people run, because I'm quite a big guy. I'm super tall. Like very tall, like 6'6", 6'7" tall. I'm not a light specimen. I'm not built like a Kenyan. This year at Comrades, I lined up at 130 kg. So I'm a big human being, right? And where people make up time, for a lot of people, is running the downs a little bit harder, and they take it easy on the ups. I'm the opposite. So I find the downs hurt me a lot, so I have to take it really easy on the downs, and I find I'm a lot stronger on the ups. So in my first Comrades, the 12-hour bus came past me fairly early, and I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. If the 12-hour bus is coming past, I need to keep up with these guys. And I found that they were running the downs too hard, and then they weren't running the ups hard enough, or they were just walking the ups. And where I felt like I could go harder, they were holding back, and where I felt like I should be holding back, they were going harder. So it was this total opposite, and it just shredded my quads, especially coming down into Drummond from Mtshali, and then I blew up on the back ends coming up both his hills. So and then struggled my way to Winston Park, and that was my 2010 experience. And I didn't really think too much about it at the time, but I'd learned, I've got to run my own race, and that's what I've done since. This year, exactly the same thing happened. The bus passed me at almost exactly the same spot, and I had an experience at Two Oceans this year where they passed me as well, and I was just like, they passed me, so what? I'm going to run my own race. I'm sure I'll see them again. I didn't see them again in 2025, but still finished the race. And I did sort of realize that, experience plays a massive part in this, because psychologically, when that bus comes past you, especially as a novice, you go, well, that's it. My race is done. If I can't keep up with the 12-hour bus, I'm finished. And that was why I wanted you to take a look at this data, is just to see, because people see these buses, especially the 12-hour bus, and there's lots of people in it at that point in time. But do that amount of people, or the same people, finish with that bus at the end? And that's sort of what I wanted you to look at. So I'm gonna bring up some of the graphs that you've put together, because it does really sort of explain what we're trying to talk about and dig into here. So I'm going to go through these, and I'm going to give the floor to you here, Stuart. Like, won't you talk us through each one as we go, and the context and what this actually shows?
Sure. Okay, so with this graph, the way it's calculated is to take the finish time of the pace setter. So what I've done is in each pace setting bus, I've taken just the one person who was successful. So these are all successful. The only exception is the Group 1 10-hour bus where they didn't make it. So
we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that just now as well. Okay.
And then working back from that, so this specific graph, and I've played around with the numbers, but it's basically anyone who finished 30 seconds ahead of the pace setter, or 60 up to 60 seconds behind. So it's a 90-second range of that person. Then from the finish, it's then gone and said how many of those people who were in that 90-second range were also in the range at 86 kilometers. So if you look in the red line at the top there, you can see it's just under 100 in the case. That's a 12-hour bus. Then you go to Westville, basically it's saying, Sherwood, it's saying how many were at the finish and 86 and at Sherwood and so on. So if you're looking at Drummond, you're saying how many people were Bothers Hill, Winston Park, Pinetown, Westville, Sherwood, 86, and the finish. And you can see in all cases at Drummond, which obviously is the halfway mark, it's very, very low, very, very few people. And those numbers typically include other pace setters who are part of the bus, because normally there's 2 or 4 people as part of it. So really what this data is showing is that in most cases, it's only quite late in the race. I mean, even if you look at Pinetown, which is 21 Ks to go, interesting enough, it's on the extremes. The Bill Rowan bus, the sub 9 hour bus, that's the largest one at that stage, just over 20. Almost everyone else is below 20. And it's only really from Westville that the bus starts, or the passengers are sticky. Everyone else is dropping off the bus at various stages. And then closer you get to the end, the fuller the bus gets with the same passengers.
Yeah, super interesting. And yeah, again, that just sort of leans in the direction of what I was thinking. And I think we'll dig into a bit more of the analysis as we go. This one is slightly different, but the same almost. This is for the medal cutoffs. That was obviously even including the sort of the time goals, essentially. So like 11:30, 9:30, or 10:30. This is just the pure medal cutoffs, right?
Yeah, so just to remove some of the noise, because obviously there are lots of buses. So this one here is just 9, 10, 11, and 12-hour final cutoff. Just so it gives you a picture, you can see it's just clear, because obviously those are generally the most important buses, particularly at the end, because those are the people who are just, typically just hanging on and scraping through in the last sort of couple of minutes to get their gold medal.
Stuart, I'm going to ask this question, and I don't know if you would know the answer, but I find that Bull Rowan one's super interesting, that the number of people in the bus that finishes compared to the rest of the buses. Obviously, you would expect the 12-hour bus to be the biggest, but I'm like super surprised that the 9-hour bus is that big compared to the others, like the sub 11 and the sub 10.
Yeah, so this obviously just is not doing the total size of the bus. This is just the people, the stickiness of the passengers. But it is quite surprising. So I do have the data on that. I can quickly have a look up for you just now what the sizes were. They actually were reasonably consistent in most of the buses in terms of the number of people, the total number of people going through at that stage. But it is interesting that the sub 9-hour bus is definitely the stickiest. All the way until Westville, and only the 12-hour bus overtakes them, over there. So obviously there are, for those people, and generally that's also a less congested part of the field. So that does appear to be working quite well as a bus. So I expect that there's a significant number of people who can, owe their Bull Rowan medal to the 9-hour bus this year. And I know a few compliments were thrown out for the bus drivers on that bus as well. I've seen on the comments on social media.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely amazing. And then talk us through this one.
Okay, so this is okay. So what this one over here is doing, so similar to the first one that we looked at, but this is taking the finish and just taking an individual split. So it's not cumulative. So it's saying, so for example, if I ran with the bus from the start, let's say I ran with a 12-hour bus from the start and to Drummond, but at Drummond, whatever, I needed a body break, and I then caught up with the bus again at Winston Park, I'd be in the numbers from 5Ks to Drummond. I would not be in the numbers again, and then I would appear at Winston Park, and let's just say I stuck with the bus to the finish, I'd be in those numbers. So it's kind of just giving, if someone does drop back a little bit at one stage or misses a split for whatever reason. So it just gives probably a little bit more accurate about the stickiness kind of the buses. But you can see even here, the numbers are generally pretty low, or definitely lower than what I would have expected. And they're only, as with the previous graphs, they're only really very, very late in the race start to gain sticky passengers. Here there is a bit of an exception with the 12-hour bus. You can see that one does ramp up a bit earlier when you're using the specific criteria for selection. And that probably is explained by there are a few people who go a bit ahead, drop a bit behind, and then, kind of catch up again. Obviously, with the 12 hours, there is the big incentive as it's all or nothing bus. With the other ones, if you are feeling a bit bad and they drop, you're going, well, whatever, I'm happy to settle for a bronze medal rather than a Robert Mtshali. But, no one wants to go home empty-handed after 12 hours and a minute or two. You want to finish just under 12 hours to get that medal.
Yeah, what I find super interesting on this one, Stuart, is if you look at the drop off in the 12-hour between Pinetown and Westville, and then obviously it picks up again before we Sherwood. What do you put that down to? Do you think that's just because that little stretch? Obviously, if you're going from like Winston Park down into Pinetown, I mean that's the Fields Hill stretch, so it's easy to make up time. So maybe if you dropped off the bus, you can catch it up. But then going through Pinetown, that stretch is quite tough again. And then once you get to the top of Cowies, you can make up some more time again going down towards Sherwood.
Yeah, I did a little bit of a chat to Shahida on WhatsApp, who obviously ran the 12-hour bus, but I didn't specifically ask about this. But I know she's running the same marathon as me this weekend, so I'll probably have a little chat to her then about it. I would assume what happened was obviously you've got Cowies Hill in that section between Pinetown and Westville, which is a real demon on the down run. I imagine that either the bus went up too fast or potentially too slow for some of the runners, and then they either dropped off or they were doing too much walking and they went ahead. So I haven't asked her specifically, but one or the other there, where the pace that the bus was going was not comfortable, it was either too slow or too fast for a number of runners. Therefore, they dropped back or pushed ahead and were later then caught up to the bus.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, knowing Shahida's sort of strategy, Shahida does not walk slowly. That is for sure. So I wonder if that could be it. It'll be super interesting to hear that. And then you've got a table next with all sort of individual numbers. Talk us through a little bit. I think this sort of does come down to more about who the numbers in the buses.
Yeah, so this is showing what we've just looked at, and this is where the graphs were drawn from. So just showing the actual numbers that are there. So you can see also just in the top one, I have -1 on the number because that would take, because obviously the pace setter I've taken away because obviously they would be inside that. So for example, if we look at the bottom line, the sub 12-hour bus, you can see it's pretty much just Shahida. Or one other person with her, and then even if you look at up to Winston Park, it's just 5 people, or the same people, who stick with the bus the whole way through to the finish. By the Sherwood split, it's I think 68. It's just under 100 with the penultimate split at 86, and then by the finish there's 388 people who are finishing within that 90-second range. Same thing if you looked at the top row, you can get a sort of an idea there of how it grows with the sub 9-hour bus. Winston Park being 20, and then continually people will stick with the bus a bit longer. The lower of the tables is the one where it's not doing the cumulative, so it's just saying the finish and each split individually and comparing them. So obviously the numbers there will be bigger, but is a fairly similar trend. So for example, there you can see in the bottom row with the sub 12-hour bus, there were 129 people who were within 90 seconds of Shahida and 90 seconds of her at the finish, and then that drops to 99 by the 86 K mark.
Yeah, and then obviously there's a lot more at the finish, and that sort of, I think, goes back to the point that we were trying to make at the start, is the buses, in my sort of feeling and looking at those graphs, and we've got a couple more that we want to share as well, but looking at those graphs, I almost get the feeling that the buses are great, like I said, later on in the race when the wheels are coming off and you really want someone else to do the math for you, where you just can't, like, you couldn't be bothered, you just hanging on for dear life. But basing your entire race strategy on running in a bus is probably not the right thing to do.
That's probably what the data indicates. It indicates the behavior of the runners. Let's just say that tends to be, if you join a bus early, you tend not to stick with it, and generally it means that you're either earning a lower medal or you're getting a DNF. Whereas particularly the sub 12-hour bus, which is probably the sort of the best example to use, at that stage you're not loving life, your mathematical calculations are definitely not working, and you probably just want to latch onto that bus, forget about everything else, and just be pulled along with the vibe and the chaos of the bus, and have someone else worrying about the pacing and getting you to the finish line, and you just hope that the math calculations are still working for your bus driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably a nice sort of segue into what I wanted to ask next, because putting your sort of trust, you've trained for this thing as an individual runner for months. For some people, this is like a multi-year project, running Comrades. If they're coming from outside of South Africa, it is a massive financial investment to get here. And to sort of put all of your eggs in that one basket on race day, in my mind, it's quite a risk. Like, especially because if you haven't run with that pace setter before, you don't know what their strategy is. How are they going to approach the hills? How are they approaching the downs? Are they using like a really aggressive run walk strategy? Like, you don't really know what they are going to be doing. So by putting all your eggs in that basket is risky. And we've heard lots of stories over the years of a bus driver that's cruising along, everything's going hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden they go, hang on a sec, and they hand their flag over, I'm out. Like, this isn't going according to plan for me. And that is one of the risks. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if you've had more clarity on it, but one of the buses this year really there were issues. And if you look at the data, it was the 10-hour bus, I think, from wave one. Any indication of what happened there, Stuart? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
I had quite a long chat to Paul Murphy from the pace setters, going through the data with him and just seeing where we agreed, disagreed on, particularly on interpretations. So I'm actually not sure. I have asked him subsequently on that one specifically. To be fair to the pace setters, the process they use is quite a good one in selection. And generally, they try to have 4 people on the bus. So they've got an official leader and they call them different roles, but really they're all doing the same thing. And you do see quite a high, if you've got 4 people, the likelihood is in a bus, the likelihood is one of those 4 is not going to make it. Sometimes 2, but it's highly unlikely that all 4 are not going to make it. I think from the 10-hour onwards buses, there were 33 different people. 18 of them made the time. So sort of roughly 50%. So they are mitigating the risk in that case. In the 10-hour group 1 bus, there were only 2. And I think I would assume that because I know people apply to go on the buses, they do vet them and check them, and they do have a blacklist of people who, aren't good at driving, and they've got a green list of people who are good, and obviously, they're building up. So I'm not sure they only had 2 there. I assume that's just because there was, sort of not that many people sort of applied for that bus. But what the data kind of indicates is they were off the mark right from the word go. So I'm not sure what happened there, if they, took the wrong pacing band or whatever happened, and then they ended up finishing like 10:07 or something like that. So, I know I've had a few people even before doing this analysis who contacted me about it and kind of complained about the bus. So, there's always that risk. There's always human error. I would always rather go with my own human error, because then I can blame myself if I've messed up rather than someone else. So I definitely wouldn't put absolute trust, let's just say, in anyone. Especially when it comes to Comrades and all the training and the expense that goes into it.
Well, with the advent of AI, Stuart, the robots are coming. Who knows? We might be having robotic paces at these races in the future. But let's look at the last few graphs that you put together. And these ones were super interesting because this is coming down to sort of medals and sort of odds of finishing and finishing in the goal time and that sort of thing. Talk us through these next 3, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Okay. So what we're looking at here is the people who were within the 90-second proximity of the pace setter at each one of the split, and did they make their goal medal? Okay, so in the case of the red line, which is the sub 12-hour bus, that's did they finish? And what you can see there is that, and obviously they were the best performing. Like I said earlier, this is all or nothing bus, so that is a good incentive to absolutely throw everything you've got at it. You can see it's well below 50%, kind of all the way to Pine Town. If you look at the green line, which is the sub 9-hour Rowan bus, which is probably the second best performing, you can see also that's sort of all the way until I think Westville, when it actually drops when it rises above 50%. Now, interestingly, one of the things here is with a 12-hour bus, you can see there is a massive jump from Winston Park to Pinetown. It goes from, I think it's 44% to 81%, and then after that it's pretty much above 90% the whole way. So like you were saying earlier, that's when your brain is and your body are complaining. You just want to shut everything down and you latch onto the bus and you just let them pull you through over those last 20 Ks. That is a very, very good strategy from what the data is showing. But it's not a good strategy to probably try and pace with the bus with the bus from the word go. That's what the data is showing. One set of data which I haven't released yet is just comparing if you ran 5 minutes ahead of the bus. If you were 5 minutes ahead of the bus, it more than doubles, in some cases, more than doubles your probability of hitting the gold medal. So that would be probably my advice: is don't run with the bus early. Make sure that you're slightly ahead of the bus if you've got that ability. But if you are having a bad day and you're feeling a bit rough, latch onto the bus over those last 20 Ks.
I'd be keen to see what the opposite of that is, Stuart. Like a couple of minutes behind the bus, because obviously that was where I was. And I mean, I don't know what the percentage of people finished around me that were behind the bus from when I was behind the bus. But yeah, that would be super interesting, because I'm guessing it would be almost the opposite end of the scale. That once that bus is gone, the chances of you finishing are pretty slim.
It is. So I've got that as well. So I will be popping it out. So it is there, but it's not as much. So the 5 minutes ahead is more than going behind. But it is not an exact science, because obviously the bus itself is causing a bit of congestion there. And then because you can go up, anything, you can go 10 minutes ahead, because you don't have the medal kind of incentive. But if you go 5 minutes behind, you're into a whole nother medal category, which then is going to impact the numbers. So there is definitely a drop, but it's less than probably what than being ahead.
Yeah, and this one's quite interesting, because it obviously points a little bit to what you were just saying with regards to being ahead of the bus, and these are the groups between the medals as well, so included in that graph. So pretty much the previous graph plus the 9.5, 10.5, 11.5s, and those halfway throughs do way better than the people who are chasing the cutoffs for the actual times.
Yes, no, and that's right. So if you look at the yellow line, that's probably the clearest one there at the top. So that's the 11-hour 30 bus. So that does appear to be a pretty good strategy. If you run in proximity with that bus, you're almost definitely going to drop off it. That's what our previous stats have shown, but you'll be able to hang in there for a medal, because you've got a bit of time to play with. So if you've got the ability, obviously going out too hard is never a good idea. But if you've got the right ability and so on, pace yourself for the half-hour buses, and then you've got a much higher probability of earning a medal. You can see in that case of the yellow line, it's above 50%, well above 50% all the way, and from halfway it's in the high 80s, and then from there on 90% plus. And that's typically for most of the. You can see it's much better than the previous set of data that we looked at, and for all of those mid-range type buses, it's in the high 80s to 90% later on in the race.
I wonder, again, you don't know the answer to this, but like I often, and Lindsay and I spoke about this with my race, and I know you were very involved with changing the cutoffs and getting the cutoffs extended, but the stress, like the added stress of chasing a cutoff, I don't think people really factor into how that impacts you fatigue-wise on race day, especially for the folks who are chasing the 12-hour cutoff. And I didn't have that once this year, where I thought I was going to miss a cutoff on the route. Obviously, the last 6 or 7 Ks were a bit tighter than I would have liked, but it's amazing. Like, I wonder if that doesn't play into that half hour too, because you know that you're safe.
Yeah.
And I think safe in inverted commas, that you don't have to stress about that.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely play a role. I mean, like as well, where you said that the psychological impact of the bus going past you, that's very difficult to go and measure, but I'm sure it plays a role. I mean, the nice thing, obviously, we've had a lot of cutoff drama in previous years. It's nice this year the cutoffs didn't come into in-race cutoffs didn't come into play at all, and they shouldn't. They should be absolutely irrelevant. So, I mean, I've always said a well-placed cutoff means that if you make the cutoff by 1 second, you've actually got no chance of finishing. And that's the way that it should be, because then you don't have to worry about it. You worry about your own race, your own pacing, not that you're going to get pulled off the road before the finish. Plus, with that, I also think that there is some, most runners would choose the dignity of crossing the line after the gun. They've gone the distance, they didn't get a medal. Most people would probably choose that rather than stopping, knowing that that their medal has gone.
Yeah, super interesting. And then the last graph that you put together that I wanted to get on here was just looking at the sort of gold medal earned by runners in proximity to the pace setter. Like, talk us through this one specifically.
Yeah, so this is just once again just removing the noise of all the non sort of cutoff hour type ones. So just provides a clearer picture there. You can see that where you're looking there, that particularly the grey line, which is the 10-hour bus in Group 2, very, very low. Obviously, 10 hours in Group 2, the way the seedings work this year, that's real touch and go. That's almost like a silver from Group 1, because obviously it is a small number of runners that are being catered for. And you can kind of see the two buses that generally have got the highest success rate are on the extremes, the Bull Rowan 9-hour and then the 12-hour final last chance saloon bus. And particularly that 12-hour bus, you can see it very, very quickly ramps up once again. From Winston Park to Pinetown, that's where you latch on and you stick with that bus.
And hang on for dear life. Stuart, looking at all of this and having done this analysis now, there are a lot of people, I said at the start, who love the pacing buses and swear by the pacing buses, but there are also a large group of runners who dislike the pacing buses intensely. They are vocal. They don't like it. There's congestion, particularly the further back you go in the field. Knowing or looking at this data and this analysis that you've done now, for you, what are the takeaways? Do they add value? Should we have pacing buses? Should we do away with the pacing buses? What are your thoughts?
So I think it's definitely a debate that needs to be looked at, and there's probably a bit more data to look at, around it. I mean, my kind of view, I'm definitely in the camp of run your own race. I sometimes say I love the bus drivers. I hate the buses, because also I've been stuck in the congestion and things like that. Sort of by and large, the bus drivers are wonderful people. They're very, very selfless, and and to drive a bus for 12 hours is an immense. I mean, your body's tired and you're still keeping everyone going. I definitely not something I could do. But I do think it needs to be looked at, like, do the pros and cons outweigh each other? The congestion is the big con, because obviously, and I know that the buses are supposed to keep an avenue, for people to pass. It's just not going to happen. It's not human nature. It's going to consume, kind of that space. So, I mean, I think it's probably, something that needs to be looked at. I think also in specific races, obviously the almost the irony is in the smaller races, I think that the pacing buses work really well, but obviously they're much smaller, and that's getting people for, in the past for seedings, when you had those hard and fast seedings, so those work quite well, but then they're not kind of clogging up the road. Even if you look at a race like Eland's Valley, which has grown into, one of the top 10 size marathons, and I think it's the second most popular qualifier after Cape Town Marathon these days. The pacing buses there, but they're not clogging up the road. Everyone can still run their own race. Whereas if you look at the big races like Two Oceans and Comrades, you do have a factor there, and I think that needs to be taken into account. So, it would be, I think it's one of those arguments. There's not a right or wrong. There's going to be different points of view on it.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Pop them in the comments below as well. And Stuart, that was very much my experience this year, particularly because I did run with and around the bus for a little while before they took off after halfway. And that was my experience. As I said at the start of this podcast too, is that I tend to run the uphill slightly faster than the downhill. So they would pass me on the down, and then I would struggle to get through the bus on the way up to try and get through the masses because they weren't leaving space. And I think that for a lot of people at the back of the field is our experience, particularly on races where the roads are quite narrow. Later on, Comrades is fine, where you've got sort of wider roads. If you may be on one of the highways, that's cool. But like going out of Maritzburg on like a 2-lane road where it's like super narrow, it is hard. And it does cause issues. And then people get hot under the collar and it becomes nasty. So yeah, let us know in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts about the pacing buses. Do you swear by them? Do you think the racers need to do away with them? I think it'll be a good indication of sort of where we're at with regards to these pacing buses at the moment as well. And then I just wanted to touch on it with regards to negative versus positive split. You mentioned sort of the down run and negative splits. Are you seeing more and more people, particularly on the down? I think the up is a bit harder to run a negative split, but particularly on the down, are you finding more and more people? Are the numbers pointing that way, that more people are running negative splits on the down?
It's actually the opposite this year.
Oh, wow.
So I think it was, I've got the numbers up, so let me just double check. I think it was around about 5%. Negative pace is better at Comrades because obviously the timing maths at Drummond moves around. It's not exactly at halfway. So I think it's about 5% of starters got a negative pace this year. If you go back to 2023, it was higher. It was just over 7%. if I remember correctly. But I think obviously rules change, and part of that I think was because of the two-pot start. So people were crossing the start line much faster. So they obviously, if it takes you 10 minutes or 8 minutes, whatever it is, from the back to cross the start, you're already putting a handicap. So if you actually, you run 8 minutes slow, you're theoretically you're going to be recorded as running a negative pace, where it's, it's just the handicap at the start. So everyone got away much quicker this year. The increasing also to the 5-hour cutoff might have had something to play. Although having said that, you do tend to find that further back in the field, you do get more negative splits coming from further back. The biggest one this year was there was a guy from Namibia, 24 minutes. Unbelievable. I mean, I must say that read his story and it just got tears in my eyes thinking about that. He made it by about 20 seconds. You also see the ladies are much better running negative splits. I mean, it's way higher in the
one word ego, I think, explains all of that. That's all you need to know about the females doing more negative splits than males.
Yeah, no, ego and testosterone are definitely a handicap when it comes to running Comrades. Now, compared to the uprun, so I only started doing the full negative splits from 2022. So I've only got one uprun to work with, but it's much higher, with about 20% in the last uprun. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you look at the profile. Obviously, that the first half of the up is the toughest marathon or the toughest ultra you're probably ever going to run in your life, and it does get significantly easier after that. Obviously the down run we should be able to, but obviously a lot of people do go out too hard, and it is the last 45 Ks of Comrades are going to be tough no matter who you are. But the uprun does produce a significant amount of more of negative splits and negative pace.
That's super interesting. Stuart, thank you so much for doing that and running through that with us. Appreciate it. Great to catch up, and we look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Brad. Thanks for having me.
No worries. All right, let me whack Stuart into the holding room, and then let me give you that update on Pie-Pacifque. Phenomenal story. Let me just remove that and add that one to the stage. There we go. Pie-Pacifque, Calibra Uwase, who we had on the podcast last week, pop me an email just after our chat. What an incredible story. If you haven't listened to that podcast yet, please, I'm going to urge you to go and do it. But Pie-Pacifque said to me, I wanted to give you an important update I received this afternoon. My mother, who is still in Rwanda, has been helping me to track down Comrade's mother. She informed me that the boy who died in the deadly ambush is Farani, not Comrade. How's that for incredible turn of events? The events that happened exactly as I remembered, except I didn't remember which of the boys was shot, and I thought it was Comrade, who I haven't seen or heard from or about ever since. This is great news that Comrade is still, in fact, alive. I'm now tracking him down after 31 years. They have given me a lead. It certainly strengthens my resolve and quest to honor the memories of the folks who passed in that massacre, and hopefully in 2 years' time I'll have a few more names to hold. And there, Pie-Pacifque sent a photo of his mom and Comrade's mom back in Rwanda as well. So what an incredible update. Pie-Pacifque, thank you so much. Your story has inspired so many people. We've had incredible feedback from it, and we look forward to tracking your journey all the way through to next year's uprun and all the way through to the 100th in 2027. And that's pretty much it from myself, Brett and Adults. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to catching up again soon. Until next week, it's cheers.